The neutral zone stretched like a silver scar across the galaxy. Between the borders of the Terran Empire and the coalition of Naxari, no law held sway, only silence and suspicion. Stars flickered, distant and cold, indifferent to the arrogance of those who dared to navigate their light. Admiral Tovan stood on the bridge of the Dominion's Pride, a massive war dreadnought whose armor reflected the void like dark water. He had fought 1,000 campaigns, conquered worlds, and watched entire fleets vanish beneath his command. Yet nothing amused him more than the Terran warning blinking insistently on the view screen. Admiral Tovan, the message read in crisp Terran script. Do not cross the Terran exclusion zone. Violators will not survive. This is your only warning. Tovan's mandibles curled into a grin. The message amused him as much as the small, flickering blue stars beyond the viewport. A warning? From humans? A species confined to a cluster of systems barely capable of interstellar travel. He leaned forward, fingers drumming against the console, and spoke aloud, though no one dared contradict him. Empty threats, he murmured, voice low and venomous. They are clever only in their caution, not in their courage. Around him, the crew moved with precise, practiced efficiency. Officers tapped at glowing consoles, engines hummed with restrained power, and the soft scent of recycled air mixed with ozone from the ship's energy core. No one questioned Tovan, not openly, but he felt their doubt like a ripple across still water. Lieutenant Sarin, a young officer with trembling eyes, leaned closer. Sir, are you certain? The Terrans, Tovan snapped his eyes toward her, a predator in human form. Are you questioning me, Lieutenant? I have crossed zones where stars themselves scream death. I have commanded fleets larger than their entire navy. Humanity will be another lesson. Sarin swallowed hard but nodded, unwilling to risk the wrath behind those ancient, battle-hardened eyes. And yet, a seed of unease had planted itself in Tovan's chest. He ignored it. Hours later, the Dominion's Pride led the fleet across the invisible boundary of the Terran exclusion zone. Energy fields, quantum scanners, and orbital defenses lay silent, or so they seemed. Tovan's crew reported nothing out of the ordinary. Sensors picked up only the occasional asteroid, cosmic radiation, and distant stellar flares. Still, Tovan could not shake the feeling of being watched. Not by humans, not by machines, but by something unseen. Perhaps they are hiding, he said aloud, smirking, cowering behind illusions, praying to whatever gods they claim guide them. His words echoed across the bridge. And yet, for the first time in decades, he did not feel invincible. Something in the void shifted, a subtle pressure, like the breath of life brushing against his mind. 3 hours into the incursion, the first disappearance occurred. Dominion's Honor, a cruiser 20 kilometers long, simply vanished from the fleet's formation. No explosion, no distress signal, nothing. The screens went blank where the ship had been, leaving a cold void. The communications officer stammered, Admiral, the Honor, it's gone. Tovan turned, narrowing his eyes. His first reaction was disbelief. A miscalculation? An anomaly? A sensor glitch? He waved it off. Impossible, he muttered. There is no power in this quadrant capable of... But before he could finish, another ship disappeared. Dominion's Wrath, flagship of a division. Then another. The void itself seemed to swallow them. Tovan's mind raced. Pride battled fear. Arrogance flared, insisting this was human trickery, a clever illusion of some kind. But deep inside, a tremor of doubt gnawed at him. Could humans, fragile as they were, truly possess the skill, the foresight, and the patience to strike at a fleet without being detected? Could this tiny species orchestrate an attack across distances and timescales he barely considered significant? He clenched his fists. No, he told himself. They are insignificant. No mortal being could challenge me. And yet, as he stared at the empty spaces where his ships had been, he felt a fleeting, impossible thought. Not luck. Someone wanted them to survive. Or not survive. Someone is guiding this. He pushed the thought aside. His mandate was clear. Continue the mission. Prove that humans were irrelevant. Then it happened. The human fleet struck. Not with fanfare, not with explosions visible from orbit, but with the precision of a surgeon. Stealth ships emerged from the void, cloaked and undetectable, striking critical nodes across the Dominion fleet. Propulsion systems failed, communications went dark, and energy reactors fizzled into silence. Each strike was invisible, silent, instantaneous. Entire squadrons blinked out of existence as if they had never been. Tovan shouted orders, but his voice carried no power. Consoles failed. Systems faltered. Even his flagship shuddered as unseen forces manipulated its engines. The humans had not attacked to conquer. They had attacked to warn, to demonstrate control, to show that the zone was not theirs to cross, and Tovan, veteran of 1,000 wars, realized he was powerless. Hours later, when the fleet should have been in chaos, the last ship vanished. The Dominion's pride drifted alone in the silent void. Systems partially operational, but the rest of the fleet gone, erased without a trace. Tovan stood alone on the bridge, staring into the endless black, and for the first time in his life felt true fear. They didn't threaten us, he whispered, voice trembling. They promised. The signal blinked faintly on his console. The Terran message, repeated like a heartbeat. We endure. He looked out at the stars, at the cold, indifferent void, and muttered under his breath, "This cannot be just luck. Someone wanted them to survive. Someone greater than all of this." For the first time, Admiral Tovan understood. Arrogance blinds even the mighty. The neutral zone was no longer empty. Humanity had marked its territory, not with conquest, but with cunning, patience, and will. And the Admiral, who had laughed at their warning, would never forget it. The Dominion's pride drifted alone, the black emptiness of the neutral zone pressing against its hull like the weight of eternity. Systems hummed weakly, lights flickering as the vessel floated amid the void that had swallowed an entire fleet. The stars beyond were cold and indifferent, a silent audience to Admiral Tovan's humiliation. He stood on the bridge, jaw tight, eyes scanning the starfield as if sheer will could recall the vanished ships. Behind him, the consoles blinked with fragments of data, ghost signals of crews who had simply ceased to exist. Impossible, Tovan muttered. They cannot hide. They cannot strike across such distances, without detection. Yet even as he spoke, the uneasy truth gnawed at him. He was a veteran of 1,000 campaigns, a conqueror who had stared into the maw of collapsing stars and uncountable enemies. Yet he had never felt so exposed, so powerless. Then it came, a faint, rhythmic blip on the long-range sensors. Unlike the sudden erasure of the fleet, this signal was deliberate, calculated, persistent, human in design, pulses, pauses, and a strange, familiar rhythm. Tovan's mandibles twitched. They are taunting us?" he whispered, more to himself than the bridge crew. Lieutenant Saren, ever cautious, leaned forward. "Sir, it's coming from outside the zone near the asteroid belt. It's not just a signal, it's ships, moving in stealth patterns." Tovan's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. They cannot be here. They are insignificant. A handful of starships cannot." But the rhythm persisted. Each pulse seemed to resonate, a heartbeat against the empty void. We endure. We endure. Even Tovan could not deny the subtle, terrifying artistry behind the arrangement. Tovan's mind raced. He had always believed in the supremacy of his fleet, the might of the Dominion, the inevitability of conquest. Every victory had reinforced the certainty of his power. Yet now, for the first time, he faced uncertainty. He paced the bridge. His mind was a storm of arrogance, pride, and fear. Could these humans, fragile, bound to a tiny cluster of systems, truly outmaneuver him? Could they orchestrate this invisible assault? They are just survivors, he told himself. No species can master stealth, tactics, and timing at this level without overwhelming resources. They cheat, somehow. But even as he reasoned, he felt the stirring of an uncomfortable truth. Humans were clever in ways the galaxy did not anticipate, in ways Tovan himself had never witnessed. And cleverness could topple the mighty. The bridge shuddered. An energy spike passed through the hull, subtle, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable. Systems flickered, and one by one, sections of the ship's navigation and communication arrays went offline. "They are here," Saren whispered. "They are inside our defenses." Tovan's gaze swept the viewports. The stars remained still. No explosions, no ships in sight. Only the faint, persistent pulse of the human signal, guiding, teasing, waiting. He roared orders, demanding scans, countermeasures, and sensors recalibration. Every system he commanded obeyed, yet failed. The humans were not fighting him, they were orchestrating around him, invisible, untouchable. "They are ghosts," Tovan muttered, jaw tight. They are illusions. Yet, even as he spoke, the cold whisper of doubt pressed in. Not luck. Someone is guiding them. As the Admiral struggled with the unseen threat, he noticed something unusual. A faint shimmer along the asteroid field, a reflection of starlight or something cloaked. A human stealth ship, no larger than a fighter, drifting within the shadows. Tovan leaned forward, eyes narrowing. They move with discipline, with purpose, with faith. The thought startled him. Faith? It made no sense. Humans were fragile creatures. Their religions quaint, their beliefs irrelevant in the face of interstellar war. Yet he could not ignore the instinctive coordination, the precision, the almost preternatural timing. He clenched his fists. It cannot be. And yet his mind, hardened by centuries of battle, could not dismiss it entirely. Something guided them, something beyond mere intelligence or cunning. Without warning, systems on the Dominion's Pride began failing en masse. Life support flickered. Weapons discharged erratically. Engines stuttered, the hum of the core becoming jagged and uneven. Tovan barked orders, but no response came. The crew scrambled to maintain functionality, panic creeping into disciplined ranks. One by one, consoles went dead. Then in the void beyond the asteroid belt, a series of tiny flashes appeared. Each flash, one pulse of energy, precise and untraceable, disrupted subsystems across the fleet. Communication arrays went dark. Shields fluctuated. Navigation became impossible. The humans were not attacking directly. They were demonstrating control. The Dominion fleet was trapped in a net of invisibility, precision, and patience. Tovan's heart hammered. Pride and fear collided in his chest. They are not fighting. They are teaching, he muttered under his breath. Hours passed. More of the Dominion fleet disappeared, not in explosions, but in carefully orchestrated vanishings. Systems failed without damage. Ships blinked out of existence, leaving only silence and floating debris. Tovan's internal struggle deepened. He had commanded fleets that shattered worlds, yet he had never faced an enemy who did not play by the rules of battle he understood. These humans, silent and unseen, operated beyond his comprehension. He leaned against the console, mandibles tight. They promised, not to threaten but to warn, to endure, and I am powerless to stop them. He realized the lesson too late. Arrogance blinds even the mighty. No experience, no victories, no fleets could guarantee immunity from the cunning of a species that understood something he had ignored. Patience, discipline, and purpose guided by something beyond their reckoning. Tovan gazed out at the stars, silent witnesses to his defeat. Somewhere, hidden from view, a human crew knelt, praying, not for victory but for protection, for guidance, for strength. He felt a pang of confusion. Why pray, he wondered. What force answers such a small, fragile plea? And yet, even as he questioned, he could not deny the effect. Something had guided them, protected them, preserved them, orchestrated events so that even the mighty Dominion could not crush them. Tovan whispered aloud, almost unwillingly. Not luck. Someone wanted them to survive. The signal pulsed once more across the void. We endure. A simple phrase, yet heavier than any weapon he had ever faced. As the hours stretched into the dark expanse, Tovan faced a truth he could not dismiss. His arrogance, his lifetime of conquest, his certainty in the supremacy of the Dominion, all were shattered. Humanity had not attacked to kill, had not threatened to conquer. They had acted with purpose, patience, and wisdom that he could barely comprehend. His pride screamed for retaliation, yet reason and the cold reality of vanished ships told him it was impossible. He was alone, surrounded by the void with only the persistent, silent proof of human endurance for company. They warned me, he muttered, voice heavy. And I laughed. Tovan's eyes softened as he realized the unspoken lesson. Humanity doesn't threaten. They promise. And that promise, silent yet absolute, was more terrifying than any weapon he had ever faced. The Dominion's pride drifted like a wounded leviathan in the neutral zone. Systems flickered. Life support hummed unevenly, and navigation arrays displayed a static void where Tovan's fleet once held formation. Silence hung thick, almost sentient, broken only by the occasional alert of failing systems. Admiral Tovan stood on the bridge, jaw tight, mandibles pressed together, mind whirring with disbelief. He had survived ambushes on dying moons, countered fleets larger than his imagination, yet nothing had prepared him for this. An enemy he could not see, a threat that did not strike, and a fleet that vanished without a trace. They are clever, he muttered, pacing, but invisible? Impossible. Lieutenant Saren, eyes wide, checked the sensor arrays again. Sir, stealth patterns, electromagnetic interference, gravimetric anomalies. Something is controlling our systems, and it's moving with intent. Tovan's eyes narrowed. The phrase "with intent" was enough to ignite a flicker of unease deep within him. Humans had planned this, not random, not chance, not luck. They were orchestrating his undoing with the precision of a surgeon. A subtle tremor passed through the hull. He glanced at the console, an energy spike, harmless in appearance, yet capable of collapsing his propulsion array if it repeated. They are probing us, Saren whispered. Testing weaknesses, Tovan's pride flared. Then we show them our strength. He ordered the remaining functional ships to form a tight phalanx. Every weapon system available was brought online. Plasma turrets charged, energy shields raised, targeting systems recalibrated. He would strike the invisible. He would teach these humans that nothing defied the Dominion. Yet the moment the first volleys fired, nothing happened. No ship hit, no alarms tripped, no effect. His screens flickered, and one by one, targeting systems failed. Without fire, without sabotage, without explanation. Tovan's chest tightened. They are ghosts. Impossible ghosts, he whispered. For hours, the Admiral wrestled with a storm inside. Pride, fear, curiosity, and disbelief collided. Every conquest he had won, every world he had subjugated, every fleet he had commanded. None of it prepared him for an enemy who refused to play by the rules. He thought of his victories. Battles won by overwhelming force, by sheer numbers, by clever tactics. Each had taught him the law of war. The stronger dominates. Yet here, logic faltered. The humans did not dominate. They simply endured. They turned invisibility into strategy, patience into weaponry, discipline into an unseen siege. Tovan's mandibles twitched. They are not fighting. They are teaching. And the thought struck him deeper than any cannon blast. He had been a fool to mock their warning. The faint Morse code signal continued. Steady. Deliberate. We endure, we endure. It was no longer just a warning. It was a pulse, a heartbeat, a rhythm that seemed to resonate through the void itself. Sensors could detect its energy signature, yet no human vessel appeared within sight. Tovan stared at the signal, his chest tight. Could a species so small, so fragile, really orchestrate this? Could they strike at a fleet without being detected? Without firing a shot visible to even the most advanced Dominion sensors? The answer became undeniable. Humans did not rely on brute force. They relied on precision, cunning, patience, and intelligence that Tovan had long underestimated. And perhaps something greater. Through the viewport, Tovan's eyes caught a flicker of light on a distant asteroid. It was almost imperceptible, a shadow moving with unnatural grace. He frowned. They are hiding there? How? A quiet voice in the corner of his mind whispered, a notion he could not dismiss. The humans were guided. Not by luck, not by chance, but by purpose. A small comm message intercepted from the signal repeated. A human crew, kneeling, hands clasped in silent prayer, perhaps seeking guidance or strength. Tovan's mandibles quivered. Praying? To what? He had faced death, had stared into the abyss, and had never needed to pray. Yet even he could sense the discipline, the faith, the determination radiating from this tiny, unseen enemy. Something beyond comprehension guided them, and it worked. As the hours passed, the invisible siege intensified. Energy surges disrupted systems. Engines failed in sequence, shields flickered, and navigation became unreliable. Each failure was subtle, deliberate, and terrifyingly effective. Tovan attempted countermeasures, but every solution he deployed was anticipated, neutralized, or bypassed. The humans were not striking. They were orchestrating an environment in which the Dominion fleet could not function. This is war unlike any other, he muttered. They fight without fighting. The moral began to solidify in his mind. These humans survived not by power, not by weapons, not by fleets, but by ingenuity, patience, and unyielding will. Even as Tovan's pride screamed for retaliation, he could not act. Every decision, every order was anticipated, negated, or rendered ineffective. Hours became a full cycle. The Admiral paced the bridge, mandibles grinding. He had stared down fleets, planets, and empires, yet he could not comprehend this. Humans operated on a level beyond brute strength. Lieutenant Saren, pale and tense, whispered, "Sir, they are controlling us." Without firing a shot, they know where we will be before we do. Tovan clenched his fists. They are not merely clever, they are masterful, and I underestimated them. The realization settled heavily. He had been arrogant, dismissive, and blind, and that blindness had brought the Dominion fleet to the edge of annihilation, without a single Terran ship visible. The faint Morse pulse continued, unyielding. We endure. Tovan sank into his chair, staring out at the indifferent stars. For centuries he had conquered, destroyed, and dictated the fates of thousands of lives. Yet here he faced a species he could neither see nor destroy, a species that endured, thrived, and controlled without threatening, simply by existing with purpose. They are beyond my understanding, he whispered, and perhaps someone greater than all of this has guided them. He realized for the first time that arrogance was not merely pride. It was blindness. The humans had warned him. He had laughed, and now he was learning the cost of dismissal. Tovan clenched his jaw, mandibles tight. They promised, not to threaten, but to endure, and they will. The stars stretched endlessly before him. The humans were unseen, unheard, yet their presence weighed more than any fleet, more than any weapon, and the Admiral, veteran of 1,000 campaigns, finally understood the first law of this war. You do not underestimate a species whose will cannot be broken. The void was silent, yet every pulse, every flicker of energy, every failing console spoke of a meticulous presence. Admiral Tovan stood on the bridge of the Dominion's pride, jaw tight, mandibles flexing as the realization sunk in. The humans were not attacking. They were orchestrating a cage, and he was the prisoner. He had commanded fleets that could obliterate planets, yet here in the neutral expanse he was powerless. The invisible siege continued. They anticipate everything, Lieutenant Saren muttered, eyes scanning the failing systems. Every maneuver we try, every attempt to regroup, they are ready. Tovan's mandibles twitched. His pride screamed for retaliation, for direct action, for the satisfaction of conquering. Yet he could do nothing. The humans were beyond direct engagement. Their strikes were unseen, untouchable, precise as a surgeon's scalpel, patient as the void itself. For hours the Dominion fleet drifted in helpless formation. Then, without warning, a single human stealth ship materialized briefly from the darkness near a drifting asteroid. Its silhouette was minimal, but the effect was catastrophic. One by one, energy reactors aboard Dominion cruisers fizzled, shields collapsed, and propulsion units shut down. The bridge erupted in controlled chaos. Officers barked orders, tried to redirect power, rewrote systems, but each action was anticipated. The humans did not merely disable ships, they guided them toward dysfunction, exploiting every weakness in anticipation. Tovan's chest tightened. He realized, with a cold clarity, that brute force was useless here. They fight with intellect, he muttered under his breath, and patience. And faith. The word echoed, strange and unfamiliar, yet impossible to ignore. Somewhere, somehow, human determination had been guided by something greater. Tovan leaned against the command console, staring out at the infinite black. He had conquered hundreds of systems, eradicated billions, yet he had never faced a foe who demanded more than weapons, tactics, and fear. He struggled with disbelief. They are only human, fragile, mortal, insignificant. Yet every act of survival feels deliberate, guided, perfect. His pride bristled. He wanted to strike, to assert dominance, to crush their spirit. But the more he tried, the more he realized the futility of force. The humans were teaching a lesson in patience, intelligence, and endurance, and for the first time, Tovan felt respect mingle with fear. From the viewport, Tovan glimpsed another faint shimmer along the asteroid belt. A coordinated squadron, invisible until light caught their reflective shields. They moved with flawless timing, striking without being detected, disabling critical systems, then disappearing again. Lieutenant Saren's voice trembled. "Sir, they are everywhere." "But nowhere. How?" Tovan's eyes narrowed. "Because they are not fighting for victory alone. They are fighting for survival, for will, for purpose, guided by something we cannot see." The idea was unthinkable. A species so small, so insignificant by galactic standards, operating under a higher guidance he could not comprehend. Yet in the silent rhythm of their invisible strikes, Tovan felt the undeniable truth. Humanity's endurance was their weapon, a pulse, faint yet deliberate, echoed across the comm array. We endure. The signal was simple, yet heavier than any dreadnought or superweapon. It resonated across space, a quiet declaration of defiance and purpose. Tovan's chest tightened. He repeated the phrase aloud, almost involuntarily. We endure. The words carried a weight he had never known in battle, a moral, a truth beyond combat. The humans did not threaten. They promised. They promised survival, persistence, and the refusal to be broken. Even now, kneeling crews prayed silently aboard their invisible ships, seeking guidance, strength, or protection. Tovan, watching this, felt something stir deep within, a notion he had never entertained in his career. That faith, purpose, and will could be mightier than fleets and weapons. The Dominion fleet continued to falter. Ships drifted without propulsion, communications failed, and shields collapsed in silent succession. Tovan ordered repairs, countermeasures, even desperate retreats, but each attempt was anticipated, negated, and rendered useless. He realized something terrifying. He was not merely being defeated. He was being educated. The humans had no need to engage openly. Their intellect, patience, and unbroken spirit were enough to dismantle even the mightiest of fleets. Tovan felt the gnawing truth. Arrogance had blinded him. He had laughed at their warning. He had mocked their message. And now he was paying the price, not with death alone, but with the revelation of his own limitations. Hours bled into the void. Tovan sat alone, surrounded by the remnants of his pride and the ghostly pulse of human endurance. For centuries he had believed in the supremacy of power, in the inevitability of conquest. Yet here, in the silent expanse, he confronted something far beyond physical strength. A species whose survival depended on intelligence, patience, and willpower, qualities he had underestimated at his peril. They are guided, he whispered, voice soft, mandibles trembling. Not luck, not chance. Someone greater than all of this protects them, preserves them, directs them. The phrase repeated in his mind, echoing across the empty bridge. We endure. And Tovan finally understood. The humans had not attacked to dominate. They had attacked to warn, to demonstrate their resolve, to show that even a mighty empire could not break them. They had endured, and they would continue to endure. Admiral Tovan, veteran of 1,000 campaigns, stared into the void and admitted the truth. Arrogance blinds even the mighty. Intelligence, patience, purpose, and faith, qualities humans wielded as weapons, were more powerful than fleets, weapons, or conquest. And as the silent pulse of human endurance echoed across the void, Tovan realized his lesson. Underestimate humanity, and you risk losing not just a battle, but your understanding of strength itself. The Dominion's pride floated like a wounded titan amid the void, its hull scarred by unseen assaults and internal system failures. For hours, Admiral Tovan had paced the bridge, mandibles tight, mind racing with disbelief. Every command he issued had been anticipated and nullified. Every attempt to regain control only deepened the humiliation. The human fleet remained invisible, yet their presence dominated every sensor, every system, every thought aboard the dreadnought. They were everywhere and nowhere, silent, patient, precise. Lieutenant Saren, standing rigid at her console, finally broke the heavy silence. Sir, they're not just hiding. They're controlling the battlefield. Without engaging directly, it's brilliant. Tovan's chest tightened. Brilliant. A word he had rarely allowed himself to utter. For centuries, the Dominion had measured brilliance in firepower, in conquest, and yet here, the humans displayed a cunning that dwarfed even the most complex strategies he had devised. Tovan sank into his command chair, eyes fixed on the starfield. The vast emptiness stretched endlessly, indifferent yet alive with the invisible pulse of human ingenuity. He had always believed in the supremacy of strength, the inevitability of victory. Yet here he faced a species who had never threatened him, yet commanded his respect. He struggled with the storm of his mind, pride, disbelief, fear, and a reluctant admiration. They fight not with weapons alone, but with patience, cunning, and will, he muttered. And faith, something guides them. The thought was alien, unsettling. Humans were fragile mortal beings. And yet kneeling crews, silent prayers, and the unbroken pulse of strategy hinted at guidance beyond simple intelligence. For the first time, Tovan questioned his assumptions. Perhaps survival required more than might. Perhaps it required purpose, discipline, and the courage to endure the unseen. A faint shimmer caught Tovan's eye along a nearby asteroid cluster. Human stealth vessels, almost invisible, maneuvered with perfect timing. Systems flickered in response to their invisible strikes. Propulsion faltered, shields weakened, but no human crew had fired a shot visible to the Dominion sensors. Tovan clenched his fists, trying to understand. They are anticipating everything, as if guided. He wondered aloud why a species so small could wield such influence. The answer eluded him. Yet he sensed a presence, a purpose, perhaps even a higher force ensuring their survival. Not luck, he whispered under his breath. Not chance. Someone wants them to endure. The humans' invisible siege continued. Entire divisions of the Dominion fleet drifted powerless, systems failing one by one. Energy cores went offline without explosion. Navigation units collapsed without warning. The humans were demonstrating dominance not through destruction, but by control. Tovan barked orders to reroute power, to consolidate ships, to engage, yet each attempt failed. The humans were not attacking. They were orchestrating a controlled lesson in futility, teaching him the cost of arrogance. They endure, and we cannot stop them, Tovan muttered. They survive because they must, because they are guided by something beyond mere strategy. He could feel it, a subtle but undeniable truth. The Terran's endurance was more than ingenuity. It was faith, purpose, and courage manifesting in every calculated move. Hours stretched into cycles. The pulse of the human message, "We endure," repeated across the void, a steady, unyielding rhythm. Tovan watched as systems failed in sequence, ships drifted helplessly, and yet no human vessel showed itself in full view. His pride bristled, but he could not deny a grudging respect. The humans were not reckless. They were disciplined, not violent for the sake of violence, purposeful, not loud in their threats, unwavering in their promise to endure. Saren leaned close, voice barely audible. "Sir, I think they're teaching us, showing us what it means to endure without attacking." Tovan exhaled, mandibles trembling. The truth cut deeper than any weapon. Humans were teaching the mighty to respect resilience, patience, and will. And he, Admiral of the Dominion, was their student. The Admiral turned from the viewport, facing his officers with eyes heavy with reluctant understanding. "They do not threaten. They promise," he said, voice firm yet tinged with humility. "They endure because they must, and we are learning the cost of arrogance." He stared at the blinking sensors, imagining the human crews kneeling, praying, planning, and guiding their invisible assault with discipline and purpose. Somehow, somewhere, they were protected, preserved, and orchestrated by a force beyond comprehension. "Perhaps there is someone watching over them," he muttered quietly. "Not luck. Someone wanted them to survive." The message pulsed again, steady as a heartbeat. "We endure." For the first time, Tovan felt powerless in a way he had never experienced. The humans did not strike to dominate. They struck to demonstrate. They were invisible, patient, and precise. They were resilient, disciplined, and perhaps guided by faith and purpose beyond comprehension. Tovan realized his arrogance had blinded him. Mocking their warning had been a fatal mistake, not of weaponry but of understanding. He was no longer merely a conqueror facing an enemy. He was a witness to a force far greater than fleets and firepower, the indomitable human spirit. "We endure," he whispered, finally comprehending. "And they will, because they must, and because someone greater than all of this ensures they do." The void stretched endlessly, dark and silent, yet Admiral Tovan felt it teem with life, human life, though invisible, silent, and precise. The Dominion fleet, once a proud assembly of power, drifted impotent in the neutral zone. Ship systems failed in subtle, deliberate sequences. Propulsion units sputtered. Shields flickered. Communications sputtered, then went dead. Tovan stood rigid on the bridge of the Dominion's pride, jaw clenched, mandibles grinding with tension. Every instinct in him screamed to strike, yet every attempt was anticipated, negated, and neutralized. The humans did not fight openly. They controlled the battlefield without revealing themselves. "They are everywhere," Saren whispered, voice trembling. "We cannot detect them, but they control us completely." Tovan's gaze narrowed. No species should possess this level of cunning, this precision, this patience. Without warning, a series of subtle energy surges rippled through the Dominion fleet. Systems failed in carefully choreographed order. A cruiser lost propulsion, then shields collapsed. Another's energy core destabilized, forcing emergency shutdowns. Every disruption was deliberate, calculated, almost surgical. No visible attack. No explosions. Only the faint, pulsing rhythm of human strategy guiding every strike. Tovan barked orders, commanding his remaining functional ships to converge, to regroup, to counterstrike. Each effort failed. Each attempt played directly into the humans' unseen plan. "They do not attack to kill," he muttered, voice low. "They attack to teach, to endure." The Admiral's mind raced. His lifetime of victories, his mastery of strategy and force seemed irrelevant. Every lesson in conquest had prepared him to face overwhelming firepower, but not an enemy who operated in silence, invisibility, and patience. He struggled with the gnawing reality. Humans were small, fragile, mortal, yet here in the void they wielded control with precision that rivaled the Dominion's mightiest warships. "How can such beings survive?" he whispered. "How can they endure, guided by faith, purpose, and discipline? Beyond what I can comprehend." The thought unsettled him. He had faced countless threats in his life, yet never had he felt so powerless, so humbled, so awed. Through the flickering of the failing sensor arrays, a pulse emerged. Deliberate, rhythmic, unmistakable. "We endure. We endure." It was not loud or threatening. It did not demand surrender. It simply stated existence, persistence, and the refusal to yield. Tovan stared at the repeating message, the weight of it pressing down like the gravity of a dead star. The humans were guiding events with precision, invisible yet absolute, patient yet relentless. Somewhere unseen, human crews knelt, praying silently, not for vengeance, not for domination, but for guidance and strength. Praying? Tovan muttered under his breath. For survival, or something greater? The question lingered, unsettling him. Could faith, purpose, and discipline manifest as power? Could belief be a weapon as deadly as any cannon? The invisible humans escalated their strikes. Instead of targeting individual ships, they began orchestrating entire sectors of the Dominion fleet. Navigation arrays failed in sequence, leading to drift and collision risk. Power nodes fluctuated, forcing emergency reroutes. Communications were disrupted, isolating ship divisions. Tovan barked frantic orders, struggling to regain control. Every move was countered by unseen hands. Every attempt to adapt seemed anticipated before it was even conceived. They are masters of patience, he muttered, mandibles tight, and endurance. Endurance is their weapon. The lesson burned into his mind. Power without patience, strategy without foresight, force without understanding. These were meaningless against a species that could endure invisibly, intelligently and persistently. Hours turned into cycles. The Dominion fleet had been reduced not by firepower, but by meticulous orchestration, patience, and invisible precision. Ships drifted impotent. Energy shields flickered like dying stars. The Admiral's pride warred with an unexpected truth. Respect. The humans had not attacked to conquer. They had acted to endure, to teach, to demonstrate that even a mighty fleet could not break a species whose will could not be shattered. Tovan felt something stir deep within, humility, awe, and perhaps a hint of hope. The humans were small, fragile, and mortal, yet their spirit, discipline, and ingenuity elevated them beyond the reach of conventional might. They endure, he whispered aloud, and they will, guided by purpose and perhaps by something greater than all of this. Admiral Tovan realized the truth. Humanity's strength was invisible, subtle, and enduring. They did not threaten. They promised. They did not conquer. They endured. They did not rely on brute force. They relied on intelligence, patience, faith, and purpose. The Dominion fleet, once a symbol of unmatched power, had been humbled by unseen hands and unseen minds. Tovan understood now the lesson he had ignored, the warning he had laughed at. Arrogance blinds even the mighty. Somewhere, far away, humans knelt silently, guided by something beyond comprehension, orchestrating an unseen victory. And Tovan, veteran of 1,000 campaigns, understood that this victory was not merely of survival. It was a testament to the human spirit. The Dominion's pride drifted silently through the neutral zone, a colossal shadow of power rendered impotent. Admiral Tovan's jaw ached from clenching his mandibles. His eyes, once sharp and commanding, now darted nervously between failing consoles and the unyielding blackness of space. He had faced death countless times, planets exploding beneath him, fleets falling before his wrath, but never like this. Here there was no visible enemy, no overwhelming firepower, no chaos of battle. Yet the humans had orchestrated the destruction of his fleet with invisible precision, leaving only one question echoing in Tovan's mind. How? The bridge crew worked tirelessly, desperately rerouting power, rebooting systems, and recalibrating sensors. Every effort was met with failure. Propulsion stuttered, shields faltered, weapons misfired. Tovan's eyes narrowed as he studied the faint, rhythmic pulses still emanating from the Terran signal. It was subtle, almost hypnotic, like a heartbeat guiding the fleet's demise. "We endure, we endure." He spoke aloud, voice low and incredulous. "They are choreographing every move, every failure, every system, not to attack, but to teach." Lieutenant Saren swallowed, her voice trembling. "Sir, it's not just strategy. It's intelligence, foresight, discipline." Almost like they're guided. Tovan's mandibles twitched. Guided? He had laughed at the warning. He had mocked humanity. Now he realized that invisible guidance, faith perhaps, or something greater than intelligence alone, was shaping every strike, every failure, every outcome. The invisible Terran vessels began subtle maneuvers that demonstrated their mastery. One by one, Dominion cruisers were nudged toward hazards in the asteroid field. Not destroyed, not fired upon, merely incapacitated. Navigation arrays were subtly manipulated, engines disrupted at precise intervals, shields weakened without a shot fired. It was elegance in destruction, a strategy beyond the comprehension of the galaxy's mightiest. Tovan's chest tightened. Every calculation he had ever made, every plan he had ever executed was irrelevant here. These humans did not rely on brute force. They relied on creativity, patience, intelligence, and endurance. "They endure, and they teach," he whispered under his breath, voice heavy with disbelief. Hours stretched into cycles. Tovan sat alone, jaw clenched, mind storming with conflicting thoughts. Pride warred with fear. Arrogance fought respect. Every instinct urged him to lash out, to command, to assert his supremacy. But every action, every decision, failed. He realized the truth. Humans were not just clever, they were extraordinary in ways he had ignored. He had dismissed them because they were small, fragile, mortal. Yet their ingenuity surpassed the Dominion's mightiest warships. Their patience outlasted the finest strategic minds, and their spirit endured beyond the reach of his understanding. "They do not rely on weapons," he muttered. "They rely on will, and perhaps something greater guiding them." A shimmer along a distant asteroid caught Tovan's eye. It was subtle, barely perceptible, but unmistakable. Human stealth vessels, invisible until the light reflected at the perfect angle, moved with flawless timing. Systems failed in their wake, not destroyed but incapacitated, like a teacher demonstrating the consequences of arrogance. Saren whispered, awed, "Sir, they're teaching us, not just defeating us, showing us what it means to endure." Tovan's mandibles clenched. The realization was bitter and humbling. Humanity had not attacked to dominate. They had acted to endure, to preserve, to demonstrate mastery over both the physical and moral battlefield. "We endure," Tovan repeated aloud. "And I have underestimated them." Through the flickering sensors he glimpsed what appeared to be a Terran crew kneeling, silent, hands clasped in prayer aboard an invisible vessel. No words, no ritual, just quiet faith and concentration. Tovan's chest tightened. "Praying?" he murmured. "How can belief manifest in power, in strategy, in survival?" The pulse of their message continued, rhythmic, unyielding. "We endure." The Admiral felt a chill. Not fear exactly, but awe. These humans were fragile. Yes, but their ingenuity, discipline, patience, and subtle faith elevated them beyond the Dominion's comprehension. Somewhere, a force greater than science, intelligence or tactics was guiding them, and it was working. Tovan leaned against the console, jaw aching, mind racing. Every arrogant assumption, every underestimation, every dismissal of humanity's potential had brought him here. He had mocked the warning. He had laughed at their promise. And now he was forced to confront the undeniable. Humans endured not through force, but through will, intelligence, discipline, and perhaps unseen guidance. Arrogance blinds even the mighty, he whispered. And they endure because they must, because someone greater ensures it. The stars beyond were silent witnesses. The Dominion fleet, once a symbol of power and supremacy, had been humbled. And Tovan, veteran of 1,000 campaigns, understood that humanity's victory was not in destruction, but in perseverance, ingenuity, and the quiet, invisible assertion of their will. The pulse repeated, steady and unwavering. We endure. Tovan looked at his remaining crew, voice firm yet tinged with awe. This is what it means to respect a species whose will cannot be broken. The void had grown colder, emptier, yet somehow heavier. Every pulse, every subtle flicker, every failed system aboard the Dominion's pride whispered of human control. Silent, invisible, precise. Admiral Tovan's jaw ached from the tension. Mandibles flexed involuntarily as he studied failing consoles and drifting ships. He had fought countless battles, faced entire fleets, and stared into the collapse of dying stars. But never had he witnessed a campaign so deliberate, so subtle, so impossible to counter. The humans were not attacking, they were orchestrating, teaching, enduring. Every failure of his fleet was not destruction, but demonstration. Every flickering light, every stutter in the engines, every dying console was a lesson in humility. The Terran strategy intensified. The invisible ships moved with flawless timing. Power surges cascaded through Dominion cruisers. Shields collapsed in perfect sequence. Navigation arrays failed simultaneously across multiple divisions. No fire, no weapon visible to sensors. Yet the fleet, once a symbol of dominance, drifted helpless. Tovan's chest tightened. Every command, every countermeasure, every desperate maneuver was anticipated and neutralized. The humans did not fight for victory. They fought to endure, to teach, to demonstrate mastery over both strategy and spirit. They endure. They survive. They teach, Tovan muttered under his breath, and I am powerless to stop them. The steady pulse continued. We endure. We endure. Tovan stared at the rhythmic signal, its weight heavier than any dreadnought or superweapon he had faced. The pulse carried purpose, discipline, intelligence, and something more. Faith, perhaps. Guidance beyond the realm of reason. Through the viewport, Tovan glimpsed a faint shimmer, a human vessel, nearly invisible, drifting with perfect timing along an asteroid belt. Systems failed behind it, not destroyed, just incapacitated. It was elegance in execution, the quiet assertion of power without threat. Praying, Tovan whispered, how can belief manifest as strategy, as survival? Somewhere unseen, human crews knelt, hands clasped, silent in their faith. Not for destruction, not for conquest, but for endurance. And somehow it worked. The Dominion fleet had been reduced to a skeleton of its former glory. Ships drifted impotent, engines sputtering, shields flickering, communication dead. Tovan barked orders, commanded, strategized, but every attempt failed. The lesson had become unavoidable. Arrogance blinds even the mighty. Every victory Tovan had ever claimed now seemed hollow compared to the ingenuity, patience, and endurance of the humans. He realized with a pang of bitter clarity that the Terrans had never sought to dominate. They had sought only to endure, to survive, and to demonstrate the price of dismissal. We do not threaten, he muttered, mandibles tight. We endure, and those who mock us learn the cost. As systems flickered, Tovan observed another subtle movement. A Terran ship reflected starlight at just the right angle, vanishing again as if it had never been there. Somewhere aboard, a human knelt, silent, praying. The act was almost imperceptible, but the effect on the fleet was undeniable. Tovan's voice was low, almost reverent. Not luck. Someone wanted them to survive, the pulse continued. We endure. and for the first time Tovan felt a strange calm mixed with awe. The humans were fragile, yes, but guided by ingenuity, endurance, and perhaps unseen providence, they had turned invisibility into mastery and patience into power. Hours stretched into cycles. The Dominion fleet remained crippled, yet intact enough to witness the Terrans' lesson in silent mastery. Tovan's mind replayed the events, the invisible strikes, the incapacitated systems, the rhythmic pulse of human endurance, the kneeling crews, the subtle faith. He understood now the true victory of the humans, not destruction, not conquest, but the affirmation of will, intellect, and discipline. They had endured, guided by something beyond brute force, and had demonstrated the limits of arrogance. Tovan exhaled, voice heavy but steady. They endure, and we cannot break them, not by weapons, not by cunning, not by fleets, only by understanding, respect, and perhaps humility. The pulse echoed through the void once more. We endure. Tovan, veteran of countless campaigns, stared at the indifferent stars. The humans had not attacked to dominate. They had acted to survive, to endure, to teach. Their resilience, their ingenuity, and their subtle faith had humbled him, reshaping his understanding of power. He realized that the human spirit could never be destroyed. It could be challenged, pressured, even nearly erased, but it would endure. And that endurance was a weapon stronger than any fleet, faster than any laser, subtler than any strategy. We endure, he whispered aloud, mandibles tight. And they will, because they must, because someone greater than all of this ensures it. The Dominion fleet, humbled and silent, floated in the void. And for the first time, Admiral Tovan understood that survival, ingenuity, patience, and faith were as formidable as any weapon. The void was silent, yet it trembled with purpose. The Dominion fleet drifted helpless, crippled by invisible hands and invisible strategy. Admiral Tovan, jaw tight and mandibles clenched, stood on the bridge of the Dominion's pride, staring at the endless black. He had faced death countless times, commanded fleets that could obliterate planets, yet nothing had prepared him for this. An enemy who endured without striking, who taught without fighting. The faint pulse repeated, steady, unyielding. We endure. We endure. Tovan's mind raced. He had mocked the warning, laughed at their message, and now he was forced to witness the impossible. These humans were masters of patience, ingenuity, and endurance. And now, they were about to reveal themselves. A shimmer along the asteroid belt flickered, then stabilized. Dozens of Terran stealth vessels, previously invisible, began to materialize in coordinated formation. Each ship glinted with reflective plating, sleek and small, but perfectly designed for efficiency and precision. The fleet's beauty was mesmerizing, their discipline awe-inspiring. No weapons fired, no explosions erupted, yet every Dominion ship shuddered under the weight of human strategy. Tovan's eyes widened. The humans were not merely survivors, they were architects of their own destiny, orchestrating an invisible symphony of endurance. Saren whispered, almost breathless, "Sir, they're perfect, precise, everywhere at once." Tovan's voice was low, reverent. "They endure, and they show us what it means to survive, to resist, to master adversity without aggression." The Terran fleet advanced in synchronized, elegant formation. Systems across Dominion cruisers continued to fail, subtly and irreversibly. Shields faltered, engines sputtered, navigation arrays collapsed. Not a single Terran weapon had fired. It was a lesson in invisible power, in the supremacy of patience, intelligence, and will. The humans had turned survival into a weapon, endurance into a strategy, and faith into a guiding principle. Tovan's chest tightened. He could feel the invisible force of their resolve pressing against him. He realized with bitter awe that humans had never needed to threaten. They only needed to endure. "Arrogance blinds even the mighty," he muttered. "And they endure." Through the bridge viewport, Tovan glimpsed human crews kneeling aboard their vessels, silent, praying. Not for dominance, not for revenge, not for power, but for guidance, endurance, and purpose. The Admiral's voice trembled as he whispered, "Not luck. Not chance. Someone wanted them to survive." He understood now that human resilience was not mere ingenuity. It was intelligence fused with discipline, patience, and faith. Their will was guided, their perseverance sanctified, and their victory inevitable. The stars beyond were silent witnesses. And for the first time, Tovan acknowledged that faith, purpose, and ingenuity could shape events as decisively as any fleet. A communication signal broke the silence. The human commander's voice was calm, resolute, and commanding. "Admiral Tovan, your fleet has been shown the consequences of arrogance. We do not seek conquest. We do not threaten. We endure, and you have learned the cost of dismissal." Tovan's mandibles twitched. He had no words. The humility, awe, and understanding swelled within him. "We respect your endurance," he finally whispered, voice heavy with newfound wisdom. "Your will, your ingenuity, your faith. It has humbled me." The pulse repeated one final time. "We endure." The Terran fleet withdrew, leaving the Dominion fleet crippled but intact, a silent reminder of the cost of arrogance. The humans had not destroyed. They had taught. They had endured. Tovan, veteran of countless campaigns, finally understood the truth. Humanity's strength was not in weapons, fleets, or domination. It was in courage, ingenuity, discipline, and the unbreakable human spirit. They survived because they must. They endured because they believed. And somewhere, unseen, a higher guidance ensured they would continue. A species that can endure, Tovan whispered to himself, cannot be destroyed, only understood, respected, revered. The stars stretched endlessly before him. The humans were small, mortal, fragile, but their spirit was boundless. And that was the lesson the Admiral would carry forever. You can destroy a world, but you cannot destroy its will. The Terran fleet disappeared into the void, silent and invisible once more, leaving only the faint rhythmic pulse echoing in the minds of those who witnessed it. We endure. Tovan stared out at the stars, mandibles tight, chest heavy with awe. Humanity had endured the impossible, shown mastery without aggression, and proved that true power lies not in destruction, but in courage, ingenuity, and the unyielding human spirit. And in that silent, infinite void, one truth rang clear: humanity never dies, it waits,